Hello, I want to welcome you to this video series on how to become a Christian. I want to talk to you about how you can go to heaven after you die. What does it mean to have eternal salvation? Hi, my name is Pastor Charlie Avila. I'm the pastor at Globus Christian Center, and I'm the principal teacher on the teacherofthebible.com website. In this video series, I want to give you 18 short, to the point, hard-hitting videos on how you can become a Christian. What does it mean to be a Christian? What does it mean to be saved? What does it mean that when you die, you're going to go to heaven? There's also a book that's going to be made available that you can order from teacherofthebible.com. You can send us an email, or you can just go to Amazon.com and type my name, Charlie Avila, under the book section, and you can order the book yourself. I want you to know that right now, I'm in a church sanctuary. I'm in a building, and I'm all by myself. There's no one else here. There's no audience here. I'm here because I want to speak to you from the heart. I want to speak to you one-on-one. I don't want to have a conversation with a whole bunch of people, although through the internet, through YouTube, or wherever you're watching this from, you'll be able to have this conversation. I'm having it with a lot of people, but I want to have it with you individually, and I hope that you will stay with me. I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm going to get right to the point. I'm not going to use religious jargon. I am going to quote a lot of things from the Bible. That's true. I'm going to use a lot of the biblical language. But I just want you to know that I'm going to talk to you from the heart very directly. I'm just going to say it. I'm just going to state it. What I need to say, I'm going to say it to you. So I hope you stay with me on this journey. Again, these video messages will be short. They'll be to the point. And I want to show you how you can become a Christian, how you can have eternal salvation. Well, I'm going to start where we need to start, the very beginning. We need to start from the book of Genesis, the very beginning. What happened there? Why is it that something that happened there brings us to this place of seeking salvation or needing to be rescued by somebody? I want to tell you something about falls, as we're going to talk here about the fall of man. The statistics are startling. Do you realize how many people are killed, injured, and maimed as a result of falls? From national health statistics and international statistics from the World Health Organization or the Center for Disease Control, you can get this information. But every year, worldwide, 646,000 people die as a result of a fall. And they say that over 37 million people are so injured that they require medical attention or hospitalization. In the United States, every 11 seconds, somebody falls that requires them to go to an emergency room at a nearby hospital. Every 19 minutes, somebody dies as the result of a fall here in the United States. The statistics are really startling. That here in the United States, 2.8 million people require medical attention because of an injury as a result of the fall. There's 27,000 deaths. There's 800,000 hospitalizations here in the United States. And the cost is enormous. Over $70 billion are spent just to deal with all the medical costs from falls in a single year here in the United States. Without a doubt, falls are one of the leading events that cause elderly people to be injured or even to die. You know, it's interesting. I was doing this study. I found that a lot of very famous people have been injured or even killed as a result of falls. Many of you remember John Wooden, the legendary basketball coach from my alma mater, UCLA. He fell in his condominium and he broke his wrists and he broke his collarbone. Kurt Vonnegut, the famous author, died as a result of a fall in his home. Ann B. Davis, the famous Alice, the housekeeper in the Brady Bunch sitcom series, she died at the age of 88 as a result of falling in a bathtub. The Dr. Robert Atkins from the famous Atkins diet, he died in his office as a result of a fall. And many of you remember from the Superman series, Christopher Reeve. He fell off of a horse. He was thrown forward in a horse, and he landed on his head and broke the first and second vertebrae in his spine. And he was crippled. He became a quadriplegic, and really he died in the end as a result of his injuries many years later. So many, many people are wounded. They're injured. They're harmed by these falls. You know, people fall out of buildings. People fall from roofs. People fall from ladders. People slip and fall on ice. Professional athletes fall during games and injure themselves. Children fall from trees. Children fall out of beds. Children fall off of bikes, break their wrists, break fingers, injure their knees. Sometimes they hurt their ribs. Falls are terrible. Many people have suffered terribly falling out of a lot of things. Closer to home, here in our church, we've seen people injured in many, many ways. They've broken ankles, they've broken elbows, forearms, hips, noses, ribs, shoulders, wrists. One person even fractured his skull as a result of a fall. My own mother fell in her backyard. She tripped over a water hose, fell, and she fractured her and broke her hip, and she had to have a hip replacement. Closer even to this was my own self. Just last year, I fell coming down a short flight of stairs. I fractured 2 ribs in my lower back. I ended up breaking a bone in my pinky of my left hand. And I was injured, and for over a month to 6 weeks, I was going through surgeries. I was having to rehabilitate as a result of a fall. Well, falls hurt a lot of people every year. People suffer painful injuries as a result of falls. Some people are maimed for life as a result of falls. Others die. And falls, we must conclude for sure, they're not good. I want to talk to you, though, about the worst fall of all. It was a fall that was above all the other falls. The fall of falls. It brought down the entire human race. It was the fall of man in the Garden of Eden. What does a Christian mean when he talks about the fall of man, or simply the fall? What is he talking about? Well, God created Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and he placed them there. He told the man that he could eat from any fruit, from any tree, except for one. He said, don't eat from that, because in the day that you eat from it, you are going to die. That was God's warning to him. But you know what? There was somebody else in the garden besides Adam and Eve. There was a snake. There was a serpent that was in the garden. We know that serpent today as the devil or Satan. He was also there. And he tempted Eve, and he deceived Eve to eat from that very tree that God warned them not to eat. Well, that serpent said to Eve, he said, you know what? God's lying to you. You're not going to die. If you partake of this fruit, you're going to become wise. You're going to become like God. You're going to know the difference between good and evil. Well, Eve listened to what the serpent had to say. She listened to his lies. She ended up taking and biting of this fruit, and she also gave some to her husband to eat as well. So Eve was deceived, and Adam was disobedient to God's command. That single act of disobedience plunged the entire human race into the wickedness and darkness and disobedience that we now live in. Isn't that something that all future generations now of men and women will be plunged into death, into darkness, into deception, into disease, and into destruction? And sadly, what I have to say also is that all of nature has also been cursed as a result of this fall. Weeds grow up everywhere. Animals began to turn against and kill one another. You look all around us, you look at the decay. You constantly have to be fixing things. Things don't stay new. They get old, they decay, they die. You can't keep a banana in the refrigerator for a year. It just begins to decay. You have to mow your lawn all the time. You have to repaint your rooms because things are chipping. Things are becoming old. There's this curse over all mankind. There's this curse over the whole creation as a result of this fall. So living things began to die. Things no longer produced as they once did. So suddenly frustration, futility, emptiness, vanity became the way of life for everyone and everything. Isn't that something that's very sad that we can all say we know about? You know, Adam not only bit into a fruit, he bit into a new nature. It was a fallen nature. So a disobedient, rebellious, and sinful nature would now be within him. Sometimes Christians call this a carnal or fleshly nature. You might say that the snake bit him and he became like the snake. The same poison was now flowing not only in the serpent, but also in Adam and Eve. They would together rebel against God. You know what? I wish that this corruption, this fall, would have just stayed with Adam and Eve. I wish somehow they could be quarantined. They could be put aside so what happened to them would not happen to all the rest of us. I wish that was the case. But a terrible tragedy occurred. The same disobedient nature that was in them was passed on now to everybody else. It was passed on to you and it was passed on to me. We became like them. We became like the serpent. We now all became sinners. And just look at what happened to the human race. Just read the first book of the Bible, the book of Genesis. Just read what happened right after the fall. Adam's first son, Cain, ended up murdering Adam's second son, Abel. Isn't that something? It was a bloody thing because blood was shed. It was a tragedy that happened right there. All of a sudden you begin to see, as men multiply on the earth, you see violence. You begin to see corruption. You begin to see God having to bring a catastrophic flood because so many people had turned evil. Their thoughts were all evil and corrupt. Even after the flood was over and God spared Noah and the people that were on the ark with him, right after that, Noah steps off of the ark. He gets drunk. He's there nude. His own son sees him there nude. And when Noah wakes up from his drunkenness, he ends up cursing one of his sons and cursing one of his grandchildren as a result of it. We see people begin to make idols. We see them worshiping idols. We see God having to confuse the languages at the Tower of Babel because man was just rebelling against God. Men began to have sex with other men. Entire towns were turned over to sexual immorality and perversion. Isn't it something? God sent angels to destroy some cities all because of their sexual morality, and these people that were there wanted to have sex with the angels that God had sent to destroy. Yes, we are evil people. If you look at Genesis, you begin to just look at that very first book of the Bible. And you begin to see all the deception, all the evil that we have there. From the very beginning, when they were cast out, man has just gone downhill, one right after another. What happened? We see Jacob deceiving his father Isaac. We see Laban deceiving Jacob. We see Rachel stealing her father's household gods or idols. We see a man named Shechem raping Dinah, Jacob's daughter. We see Simeon and Levi killing Shechem, killing Shechem's father, and killing an entire city with a sword, all because of what they did to Dinah. We see Reuben, Jacob's oldest son, having sex with his father's wife. We see the Lord killing two men named and Onan because they were so wicked in God's eyes. We see a man named Judah having sex with his daughter-in-law and getting her pregnant. We see Joseph being sold into slavery, all because of his brother's lies and deception. And then they went and told Jacob that he had died, and when he really hadn't died. It was all a cover-up, all a deception. We see Potiphar's wife wanting to commit adultery with Joseph. We see 7 years of famine where people are literally starving to death. We see Jacob cursing his sons right before he died. And get this thing, that's just the first book of the Bible. We see all these evil, wicked, rebellious, disobedient things. So we truly see that what happened in the Garden of Eden now has passed on to everybody else. We now are sinners. Without a doubt, as you read the very first book of the Bible, you see one man after another sinning. Guess what? What God told Adam was true. He said, when you bite of that fruit, you're going to die. And that's what began to happen, right? All you have to do is look at the 5th chapter of the Bible, of Genesis. People begin to die. What do you read in that 5th chapter? It says in verse 5, Adam, and he died. Seth, and he died, verse 8. Canaan, and he died. Mahalalel, and he died, verse 17. Jared, and he died, verse 20. Methuselah, and he died, verse 27. Lamech, and he died. They all died. They all died. Everyone was dying in the book of Genesis. We read later in chapter 9, verse 29, that Noah died. We read in chapter 11, verse 28, that Haran died. We read in chapter 11, verse 32, that Terah died. We read in chapter 23, verse 2, that Sarah died. We read in chapter 25, verse 8, that Abraham died. We read in chapter 25, verse 17, that Ishmael died. We read in chapter 35, verse 8, that Deborah died. We read in chapter 35, verse 19, that Rachel died. We read that Isaac died in chapter 35, verse 29. Jacob died in chapter 49 and verse 23. And Joseph finally, on the last verse of Genesis, chapter 50, verse 26, it said that Joseph died. No matter how long they lived, they all died. No one lived forever. The only one in Genesis that lived forever was God. You know what? The Apostle Paul was right. The wages of sin is death. It's death. Everybody dies. That is why what sin does. It pays out death. The truth is, the serpent lied. He always lies. He's the father of lies. The devil never tells the truth. And I want to tell you, God is right. He's always right. He is the truth, the Father of truth, because the Lord always tells the truth. You know, as a pastor, I've officiated many funerals. And at many of them, I remind people that only the Bible gives us how people die, why people die. It answers that great question. Why is it that people die? You won't find the answer in history books. You won't find it in a medical journal. You won't find it in Hinduism or Buddhism or Islam. The only place you will find that gives you the answer for why people die is in the Bible. And the Bible tells us that the reason all people die is because all people sin. The wages of sin is death. Because death is now spread on all men, because all men have sinned. Have you noticed that 10 out of 10, 100 out of 100, 1,000 out of 1,000 die? Nobody lives forever. Everyone dies. So I want to come to a conclusion here. I want to bring a summary here in this very first session, and we're going to be done. We're talking here about the fall of man that took place in the Garden of Eden when Adam and Eve disobeyed the Lord. They were deceived by the serpent, and they partook of the fruit that God said not to take up. Our first parents in human history fell. Adam disobeyed God. Eve was deceived by the devil. This caused the rest of mankind to also fall. Everyone now has a fallen nature, a carnal nature, a fleshly nature. All of us now will do evil things. No one has been spared. All have fallen, and they come short of the glory of God. We're all fallen. We've all sinned. We all now have the nature of a rebel. We are all sinners because everyone is a sinner. That is going to be our next topic. Why is it that everyone is a sinner? That'll be what we cover in our second teaching. Thank you, and I hope you'll join me again for the second teaching. God bless you.